I know in the past, one of the things that certainly I know three of you have been on this stage quite a lot over a number of years, and you've talked about the fact that ever since the show finished, you've constantly had people coming up to you, when's the league coming back, when's the league coming back? But now you've delivered that, are you ready for that to start all over again?
Absolutely. The first question we're asked now is, will you do any more? But no, it was something we've been talking about for a long time, and it was just a question of when we were going to do it. And we really didn't start putting it together till the summer, did we? No. Sort of around June, we started writing it with shoot dates in September, October.
So that's incredibly quick in terms of turnaround, and especially when you see both the kind of the quality of the writing and the depth you go into, because it's not. No, it's so much more than a sketch show, isn't it? I mean, I think in the first series it was a bit more sketch-based, perhaps, but actually there's a proper kind of story arc going through here. There's a proper kind of, like Mark when he's the bingo man, the real feeling that people felt when they realised about, Pauline and the horrible kind of mistake and so forth. So obviously you spend a lot of time sort of working on that, but actually, in terms of the turnaround for the shooting, you're all those different characters.
Well, it's very much, I've made comparisons. When we did our Christmas special, which I think is probably the best thing we did, it was, thank you, it was very much born of a great sort of feeling of joy and excitement about doing it. Let's make a portmanteau horror film for Christmas. Why don't we just do it? And this had a very similar feel of just, I've said it many times now, but we did it because we wanted to, not because we had to.
There's plenty in there to reward people who haven't seen the show before, but equally, if people have seen the very first episode of the first series, things like Class 2B, 20 years on, or the reading of the letter on the train, I mean, did you have to go back and revisit those, or were they actually already there in your mind from then?
I deliberately went back and ended up watching the first two series just to remind myself how some of the voices were, could remember. And it was really interesting, and you genuinely do see things in a very different way after all these years. I used to get quite cross personally with people who said, oh, it's too dark, I can't watch that. I used to think, oh, people are so wussy, aren't they? And then what struck me after all these years is it's nothing to do with like gore or horror or anything superficial in that way. It is incredibly dark. So thematically, very, very bleak, which is why I love it. Anyway, a lot of people love it. It is. It's very
true. It's tonally, it's all over the place, the original shows, but they clearly are four young men that have been given a television programme, and all their influences and the things that they love are just in it.
And a lot of the time
really tell that.
You were acting up in terms of age, but you probably reached some of those ages now.
Oh yeah, beyond.
And beyond.
And in terms of when you were writing the scripts, did you go back into your old pairings again, or did you write it very much as a four?
No, we did it like we used to do it, which was we sort of started as a four, sharing the ideas, seeing what made everyone laugh, and then we went into our pairings.
I felt like we were more in the room together as a four.
There's quite a lot of lines and bits that came from us all
as we went through it, bit
laughing
by bit.
together. Like
there's one bit which is in episode 3 which genuinely came out of a group discussion.
Crying with laughter.
Crying with laughter and just thinking
the idea of doing something.
So absurd. And you go, well, why don't we just do it? It's like that's why we're here. So you'll see.
and how does it work? I mean, as a four, do you kind of plan the narrative kind of arc, so to speak, and then go off, or does that come out of you then returning with bits of writing? How does the process actually work?
Well, for this, we decided the best way forward was just to go off and look at each character and think about where they would be now. In the case of someone like Pauline, for example, of course, she's left that job. And yet, what you really wanted to write, your instinct, was to get her back in the restart room. So that was the starting point when we started thinking about that. Well, in what universe would she be back in the restart room? And that led us on to that idea. And similarly with the local shop, obviously those characters almost died in Series 3. Luckily, the special effects weren't quite good enough to render it so that you can believe the train went right in front of them. But we thought, that shop's been burnt down, but we need them to be in their own shop. So that's why we recreated the shop in the flat. So it was really just one at a time thinking about the characters. And then Mark and Jeremy did the same. We brought it all together and said, right, and then it's like a big jigsaw. You just got to decide what the through line is, and that's when we settled on the boundary change.
But which you wanted to be very simple, like Series 1, which is just about the new road. It's like, I think any kind of series arc, I think the best ones in any show are quite very gettable, and but then we found years ago, people would say, what's happening about the road? You go, fuck the road. What about the funny stuff in between? So maybe people will be obsessed with boundary changes this time.
And as well as age taking over us all after 20 years, comedy does change, and what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable changes. And when you address this in a sense when you've got the Babs character, and obviously about transgender issues and so forth. But recently, when Matt Lucas was doing some stuff on the back of his Little Britain book and his autobiography, he talked about how now they perhaps wouldn't introduce some of the characters that they had originally created or bring them back. Was that a big source of debate as to what you could or couldn't bring back?
Well, we had conversations about what we thought. It was completely led by with the characters that we had, because there's so many, we could have chosen so many different ways to go, but we thought what still got legs. And then we were very, very, very careful, like we always are, about how we might want it to shock or not. I think one of our strengths is that we don't do it casually. I think we really earn the moments when it's shocking, because you're with the characters and you care when Pauline dies. Can you believe we killed Pauline?
It's like the train, it hasn't really happened.
Yeah, it's not.
Cushion mister.
But we do try, I think, I think we are responsible that way. I think we learned very early on that you've got to, it's a great responsibility when you're piping your wares into people's houses. That's something Edward would say. Piping your wares into other people's houses. But so we are. I think that we are careful in that. We have long arguments and not arguments, debates about what we think is acceptable.
I think you've got to,
but without being toothless about
it.
it.
You've got to be conscious of that times of change and all sorts of things. It's a very different world. But at the same time, there's no point in bringing this show back if you suddenly feel like it's just anodyne and isn't what it used to be. So I think there's lots of things in the world, particularly at the moment, which are very ripe for satire. And although we've never been a satirical show in that sense, there's lots of stuff in there, taking back control, etc., it's just inevitably there because it's in the ether.
Bearing that in mind, were there any characters you just couldn't bring back, or was everybody fair game in that respect?
I think we thought everyone was fair game, and we just wanted to do the right thing with each of those characters, and we didn't want to cheat the audience out of not seeing those characters that they'd enjoyed. So,
are there any characters that you've not shown so far that will come in episode 3?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you who they are, but that's intriguing. And in terms of working with the BBC and just in terms of kind of constraints and so forth, was there anything that they felt that uncomfortable with you showing, or do you have a completely blank piece of paper?
It was remarkable, actually, that we were just, it was just as it used to be. We were just free to do it and trusted. And, obviously Adam, our wonderful producer, was part of that process, and he has a sense, he plays the part of the BBC in terms of where he thinks the line is, but it was often the opposite of what you'd think, with us wanting to edit ourselves and Adam saying, no, you must do it. And
it's his fault.
But then he has to answer the letters.
And in 20 years, one thing that has definitely now become part and parcel of our lives is social media and everything that goes with that. But you managed to kind of pretty successfully keep this a secret in terms of a lot of the character stuff and a lot of what's going on. Was that something? I mean, was it all kind of closed, or was that just something that's been a lucky kind of accident?
It didn't feel like it at the time. It was very busy in Hadfield when we were filming.
Yeah.
A lot more interest than we ever had first time round. But and as you say, there were people filming it, and I was like, oh no, it's all going to be ruined. But I think people have kept it to themselves. Really, it's not. I don't feel like it's been.
However, we would now like to publicise it a lot.
Yeah, now tweet it.
One of the things, rewatching the first series, is actually the kind of the laughter track that was, the live laughter that goes through it. And this time, and obviously I think it was with series 3 as well, you didn't have that. I mean, actually, almost as a piece of drama, I think it's improved by that, isn't it?
Yeah, we never really liked the laughter track. We were given all kinds of statistics about how people wouldn't accept it as a comedy without the laughter track. And at the time, it was just when the royal family was coming through. So we started in '99, and I think Caroline Aherne was the real game changer there. And we've got an awful lot to thank her for. So by the time Series 3 came along, we were able to say, look, 90% of comedies now don't have a laughter track. I think, it would have been very odd to have put one on this. I think it wouldn't have suited it at all.
We got the first edit, and I just wrote an email saying, needs a laugh track.
Well, that's why we've invited this audience tonight. We have recorded your laughter.
That must have been great to hear the live response to the episodes, especially when it was so new and not knowing really how they're going to be received.
Yeah, it's always good to get a laugh.
I mean, Jeremy, from your point of view, I know that you don't perform with the others, and in the film you were played by Michael Sheen, if I remember right. I mean, is there really nothing that would have persuaded you to have come and made an appearance, or do you ever make cameos we're just not aware of?
Actually, I do have one very hidden cameo in this in the third episode, but you have to look very
dark.
It's very dark. Well, I'm not an actor, that's all it is. There's no mystery to it. I don't have that skill set and never nor had that ambition nor thought of myself in that way. So, if I was up there doing it, you'd notice the difference, I think. So that's all it is, So, yeah.
And obviously, Adam is the producer, but you do have a kind of a producing role in a sense, don't you?
Well, historically, I did on the series, less so this time, just because of time and availability. But I think the thing is always it's an odd dynamic, but it was always quite useful because, particularly when I was embedded in production, because I became a channel between them and production, and that was definitely a good thing in terms of what was ending up on screen. But we're all heavily involved in it because we're all used to making stuff now, and it's a very symbiotic relationship.
The one thing we're determined to do is to bring back our great director, Steve Bentley. We couldn't have done it.
Is he here?
Where is Steve? Can Steve stand up? Oh, yeah.
So we combed the gutters of central Manchester, and there he was lying.
And I was thinking, obviously, Steve's sort of over there and you're here, but I always think it must be very difficult as a director when you've got the people who created the show and wrote the show and are performing in the show. I mean, I know that he obviously directed all the previous stuff anyway, but how does that work in a kind of practical way? I mean, do you try and get involved in the direction, or do you just leave him totally to it?
I think you trust it's that he'll do it better than we could. So I mean, we've got an eye on how we imagined it, but he's able to come up and say, "Did you mean that like that bit in The Shining or whatever it might be?" And the references are all there.
Mostly that.
Only that. So it's very easy to be able to work with Steve because he gets our mind. He's like a fifth member, so he sort of just got the vision.
Very symbiotic, as Jeremy said.
And of course, your previous producer, Sarah Smith, who worked at Aardman, directed After Christmas, and is now impresario her own animation film studio. Is going to be producing big. Obviously, you didn't have her around this time, but you did have, as you say, you have Adam, who you two have worked with on Inside Number 9. How did it work out with Adam this time around?
It was great. I mean, Adam was still a part of the process right at the very beginning because he was, I can't remember what his job title was, but envelope licker or something. But he was definitely there in the room. And but
Adam prepared the very first budget for what was the pilot. Is that right, Adam? Yeah. So there you are.
No, it's been a brilliant collaboration. We tried to get as many people back as we could. And I think it was really only Steve, Adam, and our sound recordist, David Hall, who...
there he is.
David here?
Yes, there he is. Look, we were very, very blessed because all kinds of new people, Claire Finley costume and all kinds of brilliant people, they just felt like they'd always been there. And only right towards the end, we were doing the last 3 days in the studio, lots of people said, I fought for this job. And it was lovely. It was really, really very touching. A lot of people who'd grown up with the show, terrifyingly, just really very, very keen to work on it, which is very touching.
And can you remember right at the start when you decided this, which of the characters were you most wanted to bring back? Were there certain characters you thought, well, we cannot possibly do this without, and that you actually kind of enjoyed writing for?
They're the ones that are in it. So.
You'd write a few arcs that are not in it because there was no room, but we definitely wanted to do Jeff, Mike and Brian again. I mean, even though there isn't a joke about them really. I mean, they're sort of like real people. We're saying of all of them, that could be the one like that we do a sitcom of. I would do, Jeff forever. But.
You are Jeff.
I know, I am. I showed my daughter it for the first time, and she said, "Oh right, that Jeff is just you turned up a bit, isn't it?"
Turned down a bit.
Turned down a bit.
One thing I should say is that the Shearsmith family are here,
yes.
And I understand they've never actually properly seen an episode of League of Gentlemen.
No, it's horrific.
And how are you feeling about that conversation?
I don't know.
Afterwards?
You've started the wrong end.
Yeah, I'm sure that they'll have to say it's good, or else I'll don't know what I'll do.
When you were talking about the characters like Jeff and so forth, obviously the last time we saw them, as you referred to on the screen, they were inside an elephant in Palazzo's zoo.
We had a thing. I don't know if I wish we never quite saw whether it would work or not. But we wanted, when Jeff says he's still having flashbacks about being stuck in that elephant, we did have an idea of having a flashback from series 3 of him in the elephant, just a quick and then back out. No, it's fine.
What were we?
But it was mad, so we thought no, it's enough to say it without seeing it.
Before I open it up and get some questions from the audience, just a couple of quick sort of going just back to the sort of the start of things, because there are a lot of people here who probably won't have heard you to sort of talk about this stuff. But first of all, I want to do kind of quick. Is it true that you were originally going to be called the Pawn Dwarfs? Is that true?
It was one of the names on the list.
There was a list.
And I don't think we came that close to it, did we? But the League of Gentlemen always sounded a little bit sort of Oxford and Cambridge, and but I'm very glad we went with it in the end, because it bears no resemblance to the show itself. So in that way, it kind of suits it. The Pawn Dwarves is a terrible name.
and Palazzo is based on a real character who you and Steve both knew.
Yeah.
You and Reece both knew.
Well, he was our landlord.
Yeah.
He didn't look like that. But he sounded like it. And yes, I mean, I've done the story 100 times, but he had this insistent way of ringing the house. And I'd not dealt with the paperwork, so Steve was always being hounded by him to talk to him on it. And he'd ring up, leave messages. Hello, Steve. Want to speak to Steve. And I don't know why, but we thought it was a funny thing, so I got this Hoover belonging to you. Why are you laughing?
That was
was
real.
real.
An attempt by me to try and get you to do that. Yeah.
I've done it.
And the other thing is that Pauline was your restart officer, pretty much.
And she was also my restart officer. And I used to come back. I was sent on every restart course going, and Steve was also on the dole and never went to one. It was that weird thing where you get picked, and they were picking on me. But fortunately for the world, we had her. And she was exactly like that. She was obsessed with pens. There were like gold dust in the room. And so, I used to come back. And I was going to do Pauline, because I was experiencing Pauline firsthand.
Well, she began in a one-act play that you wrote, didn't I remember
we
a rehearsed reading, wasn't it?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, we did, yeah. That first, it's called the honeymoon period. We never did it in the end. But, and so I was going to do Pauline. But I said to Steve, I don't know why you did it. Why did you do it? Why did you steal it from me?
No, you said, I don't want to do this. I think it was too traumatic for you.
Yeah.
I think your actual quote was, I think you'll do this better than me.
Right.
I may be wrong. But I'm pretty sure that was the quote.
Something like that.
And it's true.
And are there any other characters that are kind of based as much in kind of reality as those are?
Ollie's another one. He was another one.
There's McQueen, very much.
Denton's.
Yeah.
Denton. So who were the Dentons?
Well, they were.
Well, you were Benjamin, weren't you?
I was Benjamin, and they were. They were kind of family friends. I had to go and stay with.
You'll never leave.
Careful, Jeremy.
And made to feel very welcome.
No toes.
No, we would never have been satisfied with that. We'd never.
I think you couldn't, could you? Because it would be such you'd be disappointing for people that really like it, and they'd just say, well, it's nothing new. So, I mean, essentially, it's the same but different. This, so I feel like it is a slightly more crafted, because I think we've got better. But I think you wouldn't. Fans would be cheated if it was Mau Mau again or whatever, exactly the same.
I mean, also, we the third series is very different. It was quite controversial at its time. I think it's found its time. People seem to like it now. And the film was very high concept. We thought we've sort of done that. Actually, in a way, the most radical thing to do is to go back and just say, where are they now? So obviously there are some new things, but it is mostly a revisiting.
We did talk around a lot about what it should be. There's lots of high concepts ideas and slightly bit meta-textual, clever ideas that we could have done with The Return. But in the end, I think we felt that if it just felt like it just come back on again, it had never been away, that would be the best feeling about it. And I think that's what we're trying to do. So it just comes back on. It's like, oh yeah, it's that again. And that
If you finish by Wednesday, that's it.
done. All gone.
Good question. I was excited to do Pauline, I think, yeah, especially going back to classic Pauline, as we saw, so that was good.
As opposed to Diet Pauline. I'd say Les or Mickey, I guess, yeah.
I really enjoyed doing Ollie this time round. That was great fun to do another one of his issue-based plays.
I don't think we thought too much about the real world. I mean, obviously the past 2 years have been really crazy, and there were an awful lot of political cartoons drawn of the local shop and a local country for local people, and that was sort of put out there, and it felt like, you know, that was something that was on our minds, and so this whole thing about boundary change and statehood and you know, seeing, you know, Royston Vasey as a metaphor for the whole country. But it was never a satirical show. It was never, we didn't scour the news looking for ideas. We just centered it on character. And as long as we do that, I think it'll stay true to Royston Vasey. And I think if we tried to go a bit too political, it just wouldn't have felt the same. So I think that's fair to say.
Mm. I was watching Dave the Triffers the other day and thinking what a rosy view of the future it was.
I don't know.
I watch the telly.
All I know is that... I mean, there's Tracy Ullman, which you work on, don't you?
I do, yes.
You're to blame for that. And so, but they're really expensive, and I think obviously she's a different kettle of fish because she's well known. But I mean, live circuit, you get a lot of sketch shows. Gein's Family Gift Shop, which we saw them in Edinburgh, and we had them in Inside Number 9. Are great, but I don't know that there's any move that they're going to be on telly anytime soon. I mean, I really hope that they do, but it's just a rarer thing. It's not.
It's also, I mean, it's always cyclical. When we started, stand-up had been so dominant, and we kind of started to ride a bit of a wave of character comedy coming back in, and then now stand-up is so lucrative. I mean, I was talking to our agent about this a couple of months ago, and she said a lot of new people that they meet or take on, they just want to go straight on a panel show and then sell out Hammersmith Apollo, and it's like a kind of, there's a trajectory to it which is very attractive, but you have to put the work in as well, you know. So I just don't know where the spaces are, and in terms of TV, you're not aware of them like you used to. But I mean, in a lot of ways, I think strangely TV comedy has become very disparate. You know, I'm not aware of it as a BBC presence or a BBC Two presence the way I used to be. It seems much more disparate, doesn't it?
I think we say this a lot, but we were very fortunate with timing, because now the way people consume television is completely different. So, you know, you could still make an impact with the show being on at a particular time when the league first went out, and people could talk about it the next day at work, and that's gone because people don't really watch.
But it hasn't. That's the thing. It's like nobody knows anything. So suddenly that's true, and then suddenly a show will, like Blue Planet, will.
But I mean, with comedy.
Oh yeah, but Blue Planet's quite funny.
Not quite as much as we did. I mean, when we were first starting out, we used to make teaser tapes to give to Steve and to the production, and say, you know, because we just had so many films on our minds that we wanted to bring into this, you know, melting pot. And I think this time round we didn't really do that, did we? We just, because we were looking back at we were being influenced by our own show in a way. So we just focused on the characters and on what we wanted to do with them. That's not to say that we haven't, you know, watched and enjoyed a lot of stuff in the intervening years, but no, I can't think of anything specific that we referenced.
No, it was a slightly different process in that sense, because it was much more about being inside the characters than perhaps thinking in that way that we're used to think when we were younger, where it was the excitement of kind of grabbing the stuff that you loved and fusing it with what you were making up. And this was much more about telling these characters' stories, I think. So, yeah, different.
Yeah, funny you should say, because it was going out when we were sort of in the process of doing this, and me in my black suit, I was thinking, I'm a little bit like Dale coming back. In my mind, I thought that, but I know I'm not. But it was a funny parallel, because it was, we'll see you again in 25 years. It did feel like we were doing these characters that I think people have, you know, they've stayed around in people's minds. They've something endured about them, and Twin Peaks was extraordinary. I mean, that was example of someone completely left to their own devices. You know, it was such a singular thing. And I think, you know, we are, in a lot of ways, it was so blessed because we are not tampered with. Another Ollie play. So it's great to have that. You know, we have it in number 9. You know, we do the sketch, we write the things, and we present them, and there's so little change, isn't there? And that's what's great about it. I think you can tell it's so authored, and that's what's missing, I think, in a lot of things. You look at things and you think, I think that probably was once a good idea, but it's slightly being catered for everyone, and now no one really finds it to their taste. But this was very much our thing, wasn't it?
We were very lucky. All those years ago, we did have, you know, I remember when we were doing live stuff on the Fringe, I remember one particular producer came to see us and said he really liked it, but he said all the sketches are too long, they're too dark, you need 2 girls, you need songs, and all these things. And then we stuck to our guns, we did it, and then that sort of became the new orthodoxy. The new rule was always darkness is fine, darkness is in. And then, of course, you know, then you need to break that rule again to make something new. And that's the thing that I always find a bit disappointing across the board as drama as well, is that actually the things that break through are the totally unexpected things. And actually, if people should do anything, it's to encourage an authored voice and a worldview and a take on something, which is distinctive. Not like, oh, if we make it a bit more like that, people will maybe watch it, you know. And you end up with a kind of curate's egg.
It's that brilliant thing that John Plowman always used to say, which was there's a big difference between what people think they want and what they actually want. Yeah. And they don't know what they actually want until
2017, everyone.
I think it feels more... the episodes themselves are much more structured, so that each step of the way, each return to a character feels like you've got a cliffhanger and you're leaning in, wondering what the next thing will happen. I don't think we quite had that in the same way in the sketch show version of
I think the other thing is we've all learned more about story, and structure and putting things together, and so, you know, that really impacted, I think, on when we were compiling the show. You know, we developed skills that we just didn't used to have, and that makes a difference.
And we also needed less old age makeup.
At the very, very start of our conversation, I talked about the fact that, you know, that people are always going to keep asking that question. But, you know, you're coming back, you're going to do a tour, you're going to obviously be, you know, feeling great, getting back in front of the, you know, getting those cameras again, and getting those characters again. I mean, would it ever happen again, do you think, or is that it?
It has, that's it.
That is it. We're not going to have, like, 40 years later, or, you know.
No.
We're not planning on it, are we? I mean, who knows?
Planning on this?
Who knows? Yeah.
As you say, it's not something you've done because you have to, it's something because you wanted to. And who knows how you may feel in any X years to come. So we'll just leave a little bit of hope in that respect. I know, Reece, you're off to Broadway in the new year, doing Hangman again, which is great. And Jeremy, you've got Ghost Stories coming out next year, the film. Mark's going to be on Christmas Day, Doctor Who.
Yeah, then I'm retiring. Bye.
And you're retiring.
Bye.
Steve, anything you got to plug?
Inside Number 9's coming back.
Really? Another series?
2nd of January, yeah.
Didn't we see all those a few months ago?
Yeah, we were here. 2 weeks ago.
Good luck with those. A huge good luck for the show next week. I cannot wait to see episode number 3. And really, just you know, dream come true for, I think, all of us in the room. So thank you very much, Reece, Jeremy, Mark, and Steve.